In this weekly reading, Mishpatim, of course, we learn about many various commandments on many topics, and in particular, most of the laws mentioned are between different people, what's called Ben Adam Lechaviro, not laws between us and Hashem, but the laws between us and other people. Of course, the laws between us and other people are also laws before Hashem, because every law that's commanded in the Torah is commanded by Hashem. But of course, not all laws are regarding our relationship with other people. Most of the laws of the Torah are ritual laws, or laws that at any rate have no direct effect on others. But in our weekly reading in Parshat Mishpatim, whether it was given immediately after the so-called 10 Dvarim, Aseret HaDvarim, or whether it happened later on the Mount Sinai that Moshe received these commandments, but they're mostly commandments between people. For whatever reason, these are the commandments that Hashem wanted to reveal soon after the Sinaitic revelation. And the 10 Dvarim, Aseret HaDvarim, there it's balanced, right? It's 50-50 more or less. The 5 first Dvarim, I don't want to call them commandments because there are more than 10 commandments here, but the 5 that were written on the first tablet, they are considered commandments between us and Hashem. And they include honoring father and mother because their honor is considered similar somewhat to the honor of God. So the first 5 are commandments between us and Hashem. The last 5 are commandments between people. Ben Adam Lechaviro. Whereas in Mishpatim, it's the majority of commandments that are Ben Adam Lechaviro. So I wanted to just touch upon one specific commandment, which is mentioned here and in other places in the Torah, in various forms. There are words that imply some kind of verbal abuse or some kind of hurting of the feelings of the other. It's hard to translate this word exactly. In another place in the Torah, it sometimes means financial deceit as well. And it could mean just the verbal abuse, or it could mean financial deceit sometimes. Lo toneh. There is a similar word, although it's not exactly the same root. It has the letter ayin, lo ta'anun, and it's translated differently. Here, the 2 verses in a row in our parsha, the 20th verse of 22nd chapter says, Veger lo toneh. You should not oppress the ger, you should not verbally abuse the ger. Maybe that's the right translation. And then Rabbi Kaplan translates, do not hurt feelings of a ger, of a foreigner, as he translates. And then the second verse after the verse after that says, "Lo, you should not ta'anun with ayin." And Rabbi Kaplan translates this as, "Do not mistreat a almana or a yatom," meaning a widow or a orphan. So, of course, this is something that we face from relatively early in life. Already in the first classes of school, there are children who are somewhat abusive, and there are children who become the victims of abuse, and sometimes it can carry for the rest of the life. And it's incredibly important that the children be taught and that people will learn from early childhood how terrible it is, a sin of abusing others. And I wanted to just mention one interesting aspect of it, and that is, of course, there are some people who are more prone to be offended than others. And the question is, do we have to take that into account? The Torah tells us, of course, later in Sefer Vayikra, in the Parshat Kedoshim. By the way, Parshat Kedoshim is somewhat similar to Parshat Mishpatim. Both have a lot of different commandments on various topics. And there in Parshat Kedoshim, for instance, it says not to be a gossiper, and in our Parsha it says not to listen to gossip. At least according to some interpretations, that's what the verse means. And many other similar commandments are said in these 2 parshiot. And there in Parshat Kedoshim, it says, among others, probably one of the most famous verses of the Torah, that you should love a fellow like yourself. So I might want to argue that Therefore, the Torah doesn't demand from you loving somebody more than you would love yourself. So if this is something that you could bear, maybe you should then be okay with doing it to someone else. For example, a person who doesn't usually get offended when others say certain things about him, or some maybe jokes sometimes, he is not the kind of person who reacts to this at all. He thinks it's okay. So is he allowed to do to others as he would do to himself? He's okay with this being done to himself. So I found an interesting question, this particular question asked to an important rabbi in Canada. He was a relative of Rav Shmuel Wozner. Maybe people heard of Rav Shmuel Wozner, the author of Shevet HaLevi. It's Questions and Answers, Shevet HaLevi, and he wrote other books too, but this is his main magnum opus. 11 volumes came out, and he died recently when he was over 100 years old, Rabbi Shmuel Wozner. So his relative, Rabbi Yochanan Wozner, so he was a rabbi in Canada, and he was asked this very question, and in the third volume of Chai HaLevi, he writes in the 100th tshuva that in fact one is not allowed to hurt the feelings of someone else, even if it's something that this person is really very sensitive about and you would not be hurt under similar circumstances. So I think it's a very interesting moral lesson for all of us, how important it is for us to be sensitive to others and not to say, well, this person is just over-exaggerating. They're just too easily hurt. Let them learn to deal with reality. Life is life, and there will always be people who will be saying things that will hurt them. They're just too sensitive. That's not how we should approach it. We should be sensitive to these people and try to not hurt the feelings of anybody else when this person is known to be taking very seriously even relatively minor things that most people would not consider offensive at all. And on this I'm going to end for today. And if you like this video, please press like.